first you'll find a fabulous banquet, a fairy ball. If you close your eyes and you open your mind, the veil disappears and you'll see it all.
Hi my angels, it's Hailey Reese, and oh my goodness, I have never in my entire time of filming in this setup had a more fitting background than I do right now for today's video, because we are going to be talking about everything and anything to do with fairies, but more particularly, we're going to be talking about how to attract fairies and how to make a fairy garden, because this summer my grams actually made a fairy garden. This video actually has me so incredibly inspired because it's been a while since I've talked about mythical or magical creatures, and I am somebody who wholeheartedly believes in them. Very, very quick disclaimer, if you're somebody who doesn't believe that fairies exist or doesn't believe that there's hidden magic all across the world, then I guess just look at this video as entertainment purposes, but please don't spread any hate because this is something I'm really, really excited to share with you guys. So in my last fairies video, I talked about fairies and gnomes, but more particularly, I talked about my haunted house and how all of the children throughout each generation had actually had experiences with fairies and gnomes, myself included. So I will link that video down in the description if you kind of want to hear my personal experience with fairies. I'm not going to get into it again in this video just because this video is more educational and more about the fairy garden itself and how to make your own. But if you're interested and you've yet to see that video, I will have it linked in my description. I currently have a cold, you guys, so if I sound all congested, that would be why. But without further ado, let's get into this video. So fairies actually exist in a realm called the elemental realm, and they're from a different dimension. There's said to be 11 dimensions, although some people will say that there's a few more, some people will say there's a few less, but more common than not, people believe that there are 11 dimensions. Now, one thing that's really interesting about different realms and different dimensions is the fact that we are able to, if we open up our minds and we believe, we're able to see the things that cross over and exist in other dimensions in our physical realm. Now, my fairy garden growing up wasn't one that we had ever actually made. It was just a beautiful garden that my grandma took a lot of pride in and took great care of, surrounded by lots of trees and water, and so naturally fairies gravitated towards it. Now, interestingly enough, if you have a beautiful garden that you take good care of, meaning no trash, you don't rip flowers out, you're very gentle with them and kind, you may actually have fairies in your garden without even calling upon them or knowing it. Fairies are more commonly known across the spiritual community as the earth angels. They're the caretaker for the environment and the caretakers for the animals. However, although they're out here occasionally playing tricks on humans and being within our gardens and caring for our plants and animals, they are very, very fearful of the human race. More so now even than before. Now there's so many things to do with cameras and ways for them to be caught, but on top of that, there is much less belief in them nowadays than there was years and years ago. Back in the past, people believed in more mythical creatures than people do now, and that's just because people are very realistic, and what they can't see or they haven't experienced themselves, they don't believe in. And fairies, in order for you to ever see them, require a ton of belief. Now, fairies love to help things grow, hence why they're so attracted to particular gardens. They love plants, trees, roots, fruit, vegetables, but especially they love flowers and they love butterflies. Now, a lot of people who believe in fairies will say that for every tree or every plant that is amongst the world, there is a fairy that will be protecting it and caring for it. But others believe that fairies are very free-spirited and not every single plant has a fairy assigned to it. The Fae really don't like the destruction of nature, especially in places that they're going to be. So if you're somebody who's chopping down trees or maybe ripping out gardens, you are way less likely to ever have a fairy occupying that garden. They're very protective of nature, and they're drawn to people and places that love nature and that care for nature and really nurture the environment around them. Now, one of the most common questions that I was asked after my last fairies and gnomes video is, do I remember how the fairies appeared to me? I remember them being adorable, tiny, having wings, and looking almost like if a butterfly warped into what you would picture a tiny pixie to look like, kind of like what Tinkerbell looks like, but very, very small. One thing I remembered though was when the adults would come outside, gosh, people are gonna think I'm crazy, but I think we're past that at that point on this channel. If you think it, you think it. But I remember as a child, we would all notice that when the adults would come outside, they would look more like a sparkle in the air. And even now, when I'm in environments where I feel the presence of fairies, I'll see like a glittery sparkle in the air, and that's how I believe that as adults or as people who are older, or even more closed off, will see fairies. More commonly than not, that's how people see them. But a lot of people will actually say the mauve colored fairies are boys, the white colored fairies are girls, and if you see like a blue colored fairy, they're referred to as little sillies who don't quite know what they are. So they're just the fairies that maybe don't identify as either, but they're still out living their best fairy lives. So when you're planning your enchanted fairy garden and you want to set it up in a way that's going to attract the fae, one of the most important things to consider is that where there's butterflies, there's normally fairies. Fairies love butterflies.
I dug out all the grass over here.
Right.
And we're gonna put a lot of flowers, the fairy flowers.
The fairy flowers?
Yes.
So you want to get plants that attract both fairies and attract butterflies. Some of these are, but not limited to, sunflowers, cosmos, honeysuckle, summer lilac, red valerian, daisies, rosemary, thyme, purple coneflower, and French lavender. But there are tons of other flowers that attract the fairies. One thing that fairies don't like is weeds. They really like a nice, cleaned up, flower-filled environment. Once you have your garden planted with all of the different flowers that the fairies like, you can kind of have fun with it and start to add little things that fairies are known to enjoy. One of the most talked about and the cutest, in my opinion, that is said to attract fairies is placing some sort of a little house within the fairy garden. It can be any size, it doesn't even need to be accessible. Remember, they're from a magical dimension. They're able to make of it what they choose, and they're able to open it up and utilize it. But having a little house, one, gives them a place to feel safe and protected, but also shows them that you believe. And once they feel as though you truly believe, they're going to be more drawn to the areas. So as you guys can see in this footage, my grandma actually put an adorable little house within her garden. Now, fairies love water. So if you can, adding a little bird bath would really increase the chances of fairies coming to your garden. But as you can see in my grandma's fairy garden, she actually didn't have a bird bath. She took little seashells, which fairies also enjoy, and filled them with water, and just made sure that each and every day there wasn't dirt and muck in the water. You want to keep replenishing the water so it's fresh and good. But one thing that fairies will really appreciate is that you take that mucky water and use it on plants to help them be hydrated and nourished. Now, fairies love shiny and sparkly things. So in my grandma's garden, she put a bunch of different gems and sparkles, but one of the cutest things that fairies love is to look at themselves. So what a lot of people will do, and what my grandma did, was place tiny little dimes in the garden so that they can use them as little mirrors. Fairies are very cute in that sense. They're very playful, and so adding these little dimes not only puts a shimmer and sparkle, but gives them little mirrors to look at too. Now, if you wanted to leave something out for the fairies, fairies have a very strong sweet tooth. They love all things sweet. One of their favorite things is a fairy cake, which is basically bread with some colorful sprinkles on top. They also love sweet things like honey. So what my grandma did was placing it in the garden. She put some honey and she put some sprinkles out for them, and they love sweet stuff. Now, while they may or may not actually physically take it, the energies of those particular foods vibe really well with them and nourish them both spiritually and I guess emotionally for the fairies. Another super awesome trick is actually adding sugar water to the garden, because this attracts butterflies. And like I said, where there's butterflies, there are fairies. So you can also put a little bit of sugar in one of the waters to attract the butterflies and the fairies. Now, an interesting fairy fact that I read is that they have pets as well, but their pets aren't like ours. They'll have pets like butterflies and ladybugs and all of those types of things. So if you happen to see like a ladybug picking it up and placing it in your garden gently will attract the fairies as well. They love little bugs like that. Now, it's said that after flying all day, fairy wings can get tired and they love to rest on feathers. So adding little feathers into your garden is an amazing way to attract them. They use them as little beds. With that being said though, one thing that I should make sure you guys know is that please don't use feathers that you find near a dead bird. If you have any idea that the bird might be dead, it's not good because they're so friendly to the animals and so sympathetic to situations like that and sensitive. It's better to find either feathers that have fallen, or you can even get like what my grandma got, just feathers from the dollar store. One of the cutest little things you could do for a decorative touch, but also it's very welcoming to the fairies, is adding cute little pathways. My grandma made hers with little gems and stones, and it just makes it feel more like a fairy home. But like I said, you guys, the fairy garden that had fairies when I was a child didn't have any of those things. It didn't have little mirrors for them. It didn't have pathways. They came on their own. So these types of things are not necessary. You can just take from this the things that you want to add to your garden. And even if it's just the flowers and the little chant I'm about to tell you, that will work as well. So on to the little chant. There's no particular spell that's going to bring fairies, but like I've always said, intention is everything. So you could make up your own little poem, your own little chant, or just say verbally out loud that good fairies are welcome here, this is a safe space, and that you believe in your heart and mind that fairies are going to come to your garden. Why I say to make sure to say good fairies is, as you can tell by certain fairy tales, there's some bad fairies too, mischievous ones that cause trouble. Like anything in life, there's good spirits, there's bad spirits, there's good people, there's bad people, there's good fairies, and there's bad fairies. So, or mischievous fairies more so. So make sure that you're saying that you want good fairies in your garden, or else you might get some little pesky things. There's a such thing as a brownie, and they're like house fairies, and they're either super helpful or they're really mischievous. So you want to make sure that you're bringing on the good kind of fairies. The most important thing in all of this is believing in the magic of the fairies, believing that they're going to be attracted to your garden, and visualizing it. The intention is everything, and you believing in that magic in your heart is going to bring them around quicker than you could even imagine. Now, I just want to remind you guys that while you are bringing on fairies to your garden, you are really bringing on a powerful force that is the Fae. And so you want to be honest, respectful of nature, and kind. You do not want to upset them. That's not something that you want to do. And by upset them, I mean by littering in your garden, by stomping through it, by being mean to the plants. You want to be very respectful of Mother Nature. Like I said, they're the earth angels. They are Mother Nature's little helpers, and the last thing you want is to anger them. So that's how my grams made her fairy garden. Like I said, the biggest thing you could take from this is to believe. When it comes to different dimensions, when it comes to mythical creatures, believing is everything. And it's like they say in every Disney film, you know, magic comes to those who believe. If you don't believe, this is all just gonna be a bunch of nothing, and it's just gonna be a beautiful garden to look at. But if you truly want to attract fairies, the best thing to do is to open yourselves up to the good ones and to believe. With that being said as well, if you want to actually communicate with the fairies, it's gonna take some trust building between you and them, which might even just come and start from you upkeeping the garden and keep refreshing the water and things like that. A lot of people who have communicated with fairies say that they communicate through telepathy and that they hear the voices within their mind. A way to do that without feeling like you've just gone insane and you're just talking in your own brain is to work on dropping your spiritual ego, opening yourself up, and you will be able to identify the difference between your thoughts and what they're saying. When we were children, we actually heard the voices, but the purity, innocence, and imagination of children allows them to drop their fear and communicate better. As adults or as older people, it's a little bit harder to just have a fairy float in front of you. If you start to see the little sparkles in the air, they're around and they're listening, and they will communicate if they feel they can trust you. Now, one thing I want to say, you guys, is you don't need a big extravagant fairy garden like my grandma's. You could make it in a little pot. You could literally make it in a little bowl. It doesn't need to be monstrous. You can accommodate it. I'm actually gonna make one for my patio of my condo. So I'll be making a video on that on Daily Hailey. So make sure you're subscribed to that channel so you can see how I make my smaller and patio version fairy garden, but needless to say, any size works. You don't need to have a big extravagant fairy garden to attract fairies. Well, you guys, that is my updated fairy video. If you guys want me to do any other mythical creatures, or you want me to dive into anything to do with the magic in the world, I love researching these things. I love talking about it, and because I had experiences firsthand as a child, I believe and I know that it exists. So it excites me to make these videos for you guys. Please, please, please let me know in the comments below anything you think about this. If you make your own fairy garden, please make sure to tweet me in on Twitter, DM me in on Instagram, tag me in your photos, because I would love to see your own fairy gardens. If you guys are new to my channel, or you are just not yet subscribed but you do enjoy my videos, I would absolutely love it if you would go ahead and click that subscribe button. I post a ton of videos, so I don't want you to miss when I upload. And please give this video a big thumbs up. If you did enjoy it, it makes my heart super, super, super happy, and I can't even tell you how much it means. So please do that. Remember, my loves, do all things with kindness. And until next time, I love you.